At 8 years old, when you joined your first ship raid, there were families in front of you, women, children, elderly. But the captain told you, either kill them or rot at the bottom of the sea. This was just the beginning. You took your first breath in the Caribbean in 1650, but not as a free child. You were born as the son of a prostitute in Port Royal. You didn't know who your father was, and your mother didn't care. Only surviving mattered. At 3 years old, your mother threw you out on the street. She no longer had the strength to take care of you. You begged in the dirty streets of Jamaica. You fought with other children. The strong survived. At 5 years old, you started working at Port Royal Harbour. You carried ship cargo, cleaned sailors' ropes. You earned a few coins a day, but even that was very valuable. At 6 years old, your life changed. The Spanish slave ship Santa Maria docked at the port. You went with other children to see the ship. But there you were, caught in a pirate attack. Captain Blackheart Morrison and his men raided the slave ship. They killed the crew, freed the slaves, and they also kidnapped you. Now you were one of them. Life began on the pirate ship Revenge. On the first day, you were taught simple rules. Obey, don't ask questions, be strong. Otherwise, you'd rot at the bottom of the sea. At 7 years old, you received your first lessons. You learned to tie ropes, hoist sails, clean weapons. But the most important lesson was, mercy is weakness, compassion is death. On your first raid, you were just an observer. They raided the English merchant ship Golden Merchant. The crew was murdered, the cargo plundered. You watched blood and screams. At 8 years old, you were already expected to participate actively in raids. The second raid was on the Spanish galleon Holy Virgin that transported gold from the American colonies. This time you wouldn't just observe from afar. You would fight face to face with real enemies. The night before the raid, veteran pirates gave you brutal advice. Don't look into their eyes when you kill, they told you. Eyes will haunt you in your dreams. But they also warned you, if you hesitate for a second, you'll be dead. When the ship approached, your heart was beating very fast. You had a small dagger in your hand. The captain looked at you and said, "Today you'll become a man, or you'll never be one." When you boarded the ship, chaos began. Pirates were shouting. Victims were screaming. You stood paralyzed with fear. You couldn't move. At that moment, a Spanish sailor attacked you. He didn't care about your age. He was trying to kill you. Either you would kill him, or he would kill you. You stabbed your dagger into the man's stomach. Warm blood covered your hands. The man fell to the ground and began to agonize. You had killed someone for the first time. But this was just the beginning. There were also civilians on the ship, merchants' families, women, children, elderly, people. They were unarmed, but for pirates this didn't matter. The captain pointed to a family, mother, father, and little girl. "Kill them," he said. "We can't leave witnesses. If you don't do it, I'll throw you into the sea." You sweated. You started trembling. These were innocent people. But you had no choice. Either you would kill them, or you would die. The mother was begging. "Please don't kill my child," she said. But you were already in the pirate world. Mercy was not a luxury. That day you killed 3 innocent people. Mother, father, and little girl. You remember everyone's face perfectly. Each one's last words. The mother begged for her daughter until her last breath. The father tried to protect them even when his own blood stained the deck. And the girl just cried for her mama. That night, while the ship celebrated the successful raid, you couldn't sleep. The faces of that family appeared every time you closed your eyes. But the other pirates patted you on the back, proud of your first real kill. At 10 years old, you were already an experienced pirate. You had participated in 15 raids. You had killed more than 20 people. But you were still a child, just a very dangerous child. At 12 years old, you had your own weapons, 2 pistols and a sword. These were your life insurance. Because on a pirate ship there was no safety. Anyone could kill anyone. At 14 years old, you participated in your first major treasure raid. The legendary Spanish treasure ship El Dorado. It contained tons of gold, silver, and jewels. The raid was successful, but very bloody. The entire crew of 200 people was murdered. You also killed 8 people. You no longer kept count. During the treasure division, a fight broke out. Pirates started killing each other. There was no one you could trust. Everyone wanted your gold. At 16 years old, you became part of your own crew. You no longer just received orders but gave them. You trained young pirates, exactly as you had been trained. At 18 years old, you fell in love. She was a Spanish girl named Isabella. You had captured her in a raid, but you couldn't kill her. Instead, you hid her on the ship. You had a secret relationship with Isabella. She taught you to read and write. You told her about pirate life. But you knew this wouldn't last long. At 20 years old, Isabella became pregnant. But raising a baby on a pirate ship was impossible. Ships were full of diseases, violence, and constant death. You needed to take her to a safe place where she could give birth without danger. The pregnancy also changed something in you. For the first time in your life, you had something to protect besides your own life. You began to be more cautious in raids, more calculating. Other pirates noticed the change, and some began to doubt your loyalty to the pirate code. You took her to the pirate tavern on Tortuga Island. Other pirates' wives lived there. Isabella would also live there. But you would return to the Dao seas. When your son was born, you weren't there. You were on a raid. When you returned a month later, Isabella was ill, birth complications, and you couldn't find a doctor. When Isabella died, something broke in your world. You buried her in the ground, and you also took your son with you. Now he was your responsibility. At 25 years old, you began to accustom your son to pirate life. You taught him to use weapons, tie ropes. You made him live your own childhood. But at the same time, you wanted him to live a different life. Maybe a normal life. Maybe a life that wasn't pirate. At 30 years old, the great change came that would end everything you knew. England was sending more powerful warships to the Caribbean than ever before. The Royal Navy had declared war on piracy itself. Pirate hunting had begun in earnest, and you were no longer as safe as you had been during the wild early days. The seas that once belonged to pirates were becoming increasingly dangerous for outlaws like yourself. Your friends were captured one by one. Some were hanged, others imprisoned. The golden age of piracy was ending. At 35 years old, you made your last great raid, but it was a trap. The English Navy was waiting. Most of your crew was killed. You barely escaped. Now your ship was sunk, your friends dead, your money exhausted. You were hiding with your 15-year-old son. Pirate life was coming to an end. At 40 years old, you were captured by English soldiers in an ambush in Barbados. You had come ashore to get supplies when they surrounded you. Your son managed to escape, but you weren't so lucky. They took you to Port Royal in chains and tried you publicly. Your official crime, killing more than 300 people at sea, plundering dozens of ships, and terrorizing Caribbean trade routes for more than 30 years. While you waited in prison for months before execution, you constantly thought about your past. All the innocent people you had killed during your pirate career, all the families you had destroyed forever, all the pain and suffering you had caused in the name of freedom and wealth. The cold, damp cell gave you time to reflect on the decisions you had made. Did you really have no choices? Or did you simply choose the easy path every time a moral decision presented itself? Maybe you were getting what you deserved. At 45 years old, you were executed. Your last words were, "I wasn't born a pirate. I was made into a pirate. But I don't say I'm not responsible for what I did." Your son was freed and given the opportunity for a completely normal life. A life away from piracy and the violence that had defined your existence. You became a legend on the seas that sailors whispered about in taverns. People told your stories with both fear and fascination, but they didn't know the brutal truth. Pirate life was never romantic or glorious. And you died. Friends, what era would you like to live in the next video? Tell us in the comments and don't forget to subscribe.